Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations on Showing Up for Kids. My name's Tim Merkel. I'm director of the Children's Resource Center South, still getting used to my new name. If you can hear my dog in the background, it seems every time that I start recording something, my dog barks. I think I've trained her. I'm not sure, or maybe she's trained me, one way or the other. But welcome to November. November, we are celebrating National Caregivers Month and how important caregivers are in our lives. So whoop, whoop for all our caregivers. And to help us celebrate, we have invited Lynn Gall and Harriet Redmond from the Wisconsin Family and Caregiver Support Alliance, also known as WFACSA, with SCA.
WFACSA.
Anyway,
Yes.
they'll pronounce it the correct way, and I will continue to mangle it for the rest of the time. But welcome, Lynn and Harriet. Glad you guys are here.
Thank you, Tim.
So as we talk Caregiver Family and Caregiver Alliance, as we celebrate National Caregivers Month, this is a relatively, in the history of the English language, this is not like a common word or concept. So let's just start by, what are you referring to when we talk about caregiver?
Really good question. I can start it out, and I'm going to bet that most people listening to this podcast are caregivers themselves, because one, this topic would attract them, but two, almost everyone has either been a caregiver, is a caregiver, or will be a caregiver. And that means that they have at some point in time provided caregiving tasks or support to someone who needs it either temporarily. Maybe they've had an accident and they temporarily need someone to care for them, or on a long-term basis. I myself, I have been both, and have been the caregiver for my son who has disabilities for the past 31 years. Before that, it was my parents that I was a long-distance caregiver for, and occasionally I get to be the caregiver of my grandchild. So it's sort of intuitive what it is, but often caregivers don't connect with that terminology. They just think of themselves, well, I'm grandma, or I'm mom, or I'm daughter. And caregiver is a much broader connection to some of the responsibilities that we take on either temporarily or long-term. And Lynn may have a more specific answer to that question.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lynn Gall, and I work in the State Office on Aging for the Department of Health Services. And National Family Caregiver Month is such a big deal for me personally, because it's really the backbone of what we do in my area of the department. And for us, family caregivers are anybody who's taking care of, don't let the term family kind of fool you. And I think that does for a lot of people. For a lot of our programs that we have available to support caregivers, you may be a family member, but the friends are also available. If you're a friend and you're caring for someone, you don't necessarily have to be a blood relative. You could be a neighbor in some cases, and you can also be a caregiving relative that's, more removed from a biological parent, a grandparent, or other things like that, to support children who are in need of support. So when I think of caregiving, that's the lens I look at it through. And also, I just have to mention that this is a wonderful time we're living in that we just had the first federal national caregiver strategy come out last year. And I am fortunate enough, I got appointed to serve on an advisory council that is working to make updates to that strategy and to help implement it across the country and give some input. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for Wisconsin too, for us to let them know what our families need and how to do that best to support people. And, just the fact that we're looking at this now coming out of COVID, realizing, as Harriet said, everybody's a caregiver. you know, schools closed, daycares closed, kids were at home. People were respite providers who you relied on or weren't available, or were reluctant to come into homes, or we were reluctant to let them in, right? Because we had children who were at high risk. So it's just, we've kind of come out of this COVID area with this understanding that, wow, caregiving is like the bedrock and the essential to so much of so many people's lives. And it's wonderful to see not only the federal government realizing it, but employers are realizing it. Hopefully state legislatures and other people, programs, that we're all realizing that, as Harriet said, we are all family caregivers, or will be one. And so it's important for us to make sure we're supporting each other in that role.
And I'm assuming part of people getting to know about it and supporting it, from the government to the employers, is part of what the Support Alliance is trying to accomplish. And can you explain a little bit more about why the Alliance came together and what its mission is?
Well, maybe I
Go
can
ahead,
kick that off with just a little bit of background. Back in 2017, the ARC of Wisconsin had an opportunity to apply for a grant that basically said, if you can get a group of people together to work on a problem, the ARC of the United States would give you this money. So back in the day, Lisa Pugh was the new director of the ARC Wisconsin, and she applied for the grant and got it. We met at don't remember the name, Wingspread. That's where we met, and there were at least 50 different organizations and individuals representing tribes and cultures and people working in the field and caregivers, lots of diversity, lots of people coming together to just identify what were some of the issues that, as individual organizations and as individuals, we couldn't solve on our own. And we decided that what we needed was to have an alliance, to work together to solve some pretty major problems, not only coming down the road, but we already experiencing. And that was the lack of caregivers and the lack of training and the lack of knowledge by employers who were losing their employees to caregiving responsibilities. And this was even before COVID. As Lynn mentioned, after COVID, it became even a bigger issue, or more aware. The issue hadn't changed, but more awareness of the issue.
And so with the Alliance, do you have representatives, so to speak, of the different parts of the caregiving spectrum? I know you've talked a lot about lifespan. So of course, in the work that I do with parents of children with special health care needs and disabilities, you know, I'm talking a lot to parents that are providing caregiving for, like, for example, your son, Harriet, and those kids that have disabilities and they may need some helps at home, or they just need some extra support. But I also know that, you know, our parents are living longer and we're providing caregiving for them as well. Does the Alliance cover that whole lifespan?
Yes, we most definitely do. We've got partners. To be a member of the Alliance, you can be either a very active member. When we have some, they do that and they serve on work groups and on our steering committee. And then you can also be a member as just like a supportive member who gets mailings from us and gets information and is welcome to give feedback. But definitely the original idea, and continues to be the idea, is to reach across those silos into every area that has an interest in supporting a family caregiver of some sort. The only thing that we ask is, when you join the Alliance, is to come out of that silo and think about things, you know, in a bigger way. So you don't want to come in and just think, I'm only going to work for my little group of people. When I come into this Alliance, you have to be thinking in that big way about being willing to support all of the other people who are in the Alliance as well. And other than that, that's really our only requirement. And we have work groups, so that we identified after that first wing spread meeting. Everybody who was there voted on, okay, what are those big issues that we can work on together and maybe make some progress on? And those developed into work groups, which we now meet. And the employer engagement one that you mentioned, working to get employers more supportive of working caregivers, that's one of our work groups. And we've got several others as well that are on our website. If anybody would like to go to wisconsincaregiver.org, and there's an alliance tab there. Look under there, and we've got the list of work groups. I'm happy to share that screen if you'd like to see it.
Sure, why don't you go ahead? We have time, and maybe Harriet can talk while you're going there. But
Sure.
please feel free to give us the website.
Sure.
There's the website.
So there you go. These are our work groups. There's more information if you go under this Alliance tab here. You can see the goals and some other things that are happening. But right now we've got an employer engagement work group, which Harriet and I co-chair. And we just, our goal there is to create more flexible and supportive working environments for employees, and to get employers to be on board with helping make that happen, because we know that we can't do it alone through our own advocacy and through government trying to mandate that happen. But to get employers to understand the benefits to them as a company, how doing that will help them attract and retain employees. And so we just did a workshop at the annual Society for Human Resource Managers SHRM conference. And that was a kind of a nice first kickoff to get that Society of Human Resource Management to acknowledge that, yeah, this is an issue they're interested in. So to us, that was a breakthrough for us. I'm very thrilled about it.
Lynn, is there a list of the organizations? I think there might be on that website there. I don't know if you can find it. I was just gonna, excuse me, comment. As you know, Tim, I'm the founder of WisconSIBS, and one of the reasons that I wanted WisconSIBS to be involved in this alliance was the fact that caregivers are often thought of as caring for your aging parents or caring for the aging population. But the reality is family members, regardless of their age, especially siblings, are caregivers. So those little tykes that are growing up with a brother or sister with a disability often are caregivers when they're little. They're 4, 5, 6 years old. They're maybe watching out for their brother or sister in a room while mom's making dinner to make sure they don't choke, or just protecting them, or maybe being a companion, or maybe even giving them meds because mom needs some help, dad needs some help. So there's all kinds of ways that siblings are caregivers even as young children. And so I'm continuously bringing that to the Alliance to shine the spotlight on siblings. And then, of course, it's a lifelong experience as a sibling. So adult siblings have enormous stressors around caregiving, because they often have aging parents, growing children, and their sibling with a disability. So they're kind of that club sandwich generation.
So what sort of resources are available to employers or caregivers, or where can people go to get some more help? And feel free, Lynn, if you wanted to show who the partners were, we could go back.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to show.
Definitely, the current partners of the Alliance are really important, because these are people that are putting forth some time and their intelligence to try to make a difference in things. So please feel free and walk us through that.
Yeah, these are some of them.
There you
go
go.
ahead with. Yep, go ahead, Harriet.
You pulled up a good one. As you can see, these are some of the organizations that were involved in that presentation, including Tim, that we made to the SHRM group. And it's just part of the list of organizations that are involved. But Extension has been extremely valuable as we've been doing some research. We've been doing some surveys of Wisconsin companies. Of course, the ADRC, ARP, my goodness, they have a lot of resources, and a lot of resources that are not just applicable to the aged population, but younger as well. And there's that fancy new Wisconsin Wayfinder logo. I think that was a brilliant move, by the way. So way to go. The Respite Care Association of Wisconsin, Lisa Schneider, she and her team are really involved with the Wisconsin Family and Caregiver Support Alliance and have oodles of resources for families looking for respite care or training to provide for someone that they feel they want to hire to be their respite provider. And of course, GWAR, Greater Wisconsin Aging AR, I always forget what they call.
The Greater Wisconsin Agency on Aging Resources.
There you go. So, so your question, Tim, was where do you go for resources? Well, this page, well, actually what Lynn has up right now is a section of the SHRM presentation that we made. But if you go to wisconsincaregiver.org, there's lots of resources there, including the Alliance and how to access membership there or resources that they provide too.
One of the things I especially like, just to highlight the website a little bit, is the fact that you do your best to try to connect people together too. And that's, I really appreciate, I know how hard it is to keep a list of support groups going. And I appreciate the virtual support groups. And every time I look at virtual support groups online, I always remind myself they are as current as the day they were entered, and expect nothing more than that out of them.
Yeah.
Because people get busy, lives get busy. But just knowing that there's other people out there that are dealing with something similar to what you're dealing with, and maybe it's just being able to hear someone else's story or to have someone listen to your story, and how important that can be as a caregiver.
Right, right. Well, and what I really like about the Alliance, it's mostly of professionals in the field, but they need support too, because often they're caregivers, but also they're working with people that are seeking their support and seeking their resources. This is a diligent, committed group of people. If we're working on a project and somebody needs help, man, they are quick on it, and people are resourceful and bright, and so it's a pleasure to be associated with this alliance, because we get things done, and that's pretty cool. You know, you've all been in groups where you join it, but you don't know what's going on. There's a lot going on, and we keep making progress, and that's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, one other thing I have to say from the state point of view, it's like a lot of groups that I've been involved with, the state gets involved and they sort of expect us, you know, either by default or something. It's like all of a sudden, well, the state's involved, so okay, the state's in control. With our alliance, we have tried and made an effort to make sure that everybody has got the same input, the same power, the same. That's why we've got co-chairs for everything. It's not one person is in charge. We always rely on each other. So that's why Harriet and I are co-chairs of our steering committee. I was one of the original co-chairs of the whole alliance, but I've since stepped back from that. Now we've got two people, not state employees, who are the co-chairs of the alliance. And, you know, and to work that way as partners, I think is just so important. I can't say enough. Without this group, we wouldn't have been able to do much of what we've been able to do for family caregivers over the last 5 years. Just wouldn't have happened without this alliance.
Absolutely.
And I do want to acknowledge that I've been monopolizing the questions. We do have some people that have joined us today, so please feel free, if you're joining us live, to put your questions into the chat. You are free to unmute, and I will see that you've unmuted, and I can call on you. But the chat is also available. We would love to have any other questions or any comments that you might have as well. Harriet?
Yeah, it reminds me, yesterday I met with a congressman specifically about the caregiver crisis and the challenges that providers face who are trying to stay open in order to provide services for people with disabilities. And he made a comment that I thought was interesting and a little disturbing. He said, well, I don't think you have enough lobbyists in Washington. And I was like, okay.
We don't have any lobbyists in Washington.
Right. Most of us are nonprofits. We're not allowed to have a lobbyist. That kind of surprised him. So I just took away from it what I think he was trying to say to me after I kind of figured that out, is that they really need to hear from us. He may get most of his messages, most of his comments, most of his ideas and direction from lobbyists. Okay, but caregivers need representation, and we do that by being an advocate and doing the research so that we understand the problem and can share that then with people in charge of making the laws. It really is critical. I appreciated him wanting to meet with us. He's been an advocate for people with disabilities, and he is frustrated that there are maybe outdated rules, maybe too many, but he needs to hear from us. So the Alliance and other organizations that are advocating for caregivers can't be shy. We have to speak up.
It's really, I mean, I'm shocked and disappointed that there's now this power of the lobbyist instead of the power of the people that elected the people to office. That there are a lot of people you could connect with and talk to about the issues, the challenges, and the joys of caregiving. You don't need to rely on a paid representative. Just come and ask us.
Yeah. And I think that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he was recognizing that the lobbyists often win at getting the attention and getting the points across. And that was frustrating to him. And I appreciated that, but I was a little surprised that was the disappointment he has. We didn't have enough lobbyists.
Let me just put my family on hold and I'll go lobby for a little while.
Well,
it's just not,
I couldn't even legally do that.
Yeah.
But we can all advocate. We don't have to call it lobby. We can all advocate.
Can all advocate and let our elected officials know what's important to us.
Right.
And what matters.
Yeah. And that's not the number one issue of the Alliance. However, it's alliances and other groups that make that happen. I think it is important. Maybe the takeaway is we need to be a bit more organized around that. I'm not sure. That's another podcast, Tim.
And on that point, that's why I just shared this screen for the Supporting Grandparents and Grandchildren Advisory Council. This is part of that RAISE National Family Caregiver Act. There's the RAISE Council, which is the one I serve on, which is mainly for older adults and people with dementia, things like that. But then there's also the Supporting Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Advisory Council. These advisory councils are also great places where groups like WFACSA or other groups or even individuals, you can attend these meetings. They're online and you can make a public comment or get involved, give help provide some of that information that people might need as we're going forward with this national strategy. So I do encourage, there are avenues to share information besides being a lobbyist. And it's, you can do that as an individual or as a group like ours. So I hope that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I know that you're busy as a caregiver. It's hard to do that on the personal level, but those personal stories that you can share about the struggles, what you think would be most helpful, what's the best way to address those things. These advisory councils, and even at the state level, you know, we've got the long-term care council. There are places where you can have a voice and have those things heard. So I hope people will take advantage of that too.
Thank you. And again, if anybody has any questions for our guest today, please feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute and I will get them to them. What haven't I asked? What's like, what's one of the most important things that is going on that either the Alliance is doing or what's on the horizon that you guys hope to do?
Well, I think one of the things that we do sort of inherently is that we make each other aware of what's going on. Lynn mentioned the national strategy. Hey, this is the first time this nation has had a national strategy on caregivers or caregiving. That's big news. And I'm not sure as an individual or even as a part of an organization, I would have known that. It's critical. And as I read through it, as a caregiver, I thought, oh, there's hope. So in one sense, an alliance, we give each other hope. And that translates to providing hope for caregivers as well. You know, there definitely are tasks that we still haven't accomplished, and navigating the systems that always comes up, and things that we've each experienced in other groups too come up. But this is another way, by including lots of different people with different networks, to understand and get some things addressed. And so that's exciting.
Yeah, and for me, what I see on the horizon is we've known for a long time that these societal demographic changes are coming. We've got the baby boomers getting older. There are fewer younger people to do that caregiving that we've normally just said, well, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, of course I'm going to do that. There are just fewer of us to do that. Families are smaller, they live further apart, sometimes opposite sides of the country. And, you know, how do we do that? And so that's really one of the things that I think is on the horizon. And for us to, I mean, I was doing a different presentation last week internally within my department, actually. And all of a sudden it just came out of my mouth and I wasn't even thinking it. And I said, you know, we're there. We've been talking about the silver tsunami. We've given it all of these really cute names, you know, over the years about what this was going to, how these demographic changes were going to, all these older people, the silver tsunami phenomenon. And it was sort of like, it dawned on me all of a sudden that we're there. You know, when like they gave it the name tsunami, like it was going to be this big wave that would knock us all over, you know, this imagery, and you're realizing it just kind of crept up on us, especially with COVID. You know, we come out of COVID and we're like, why aren't things the way they used to be? Why have things changed? And we're like, well, because people decided they were going to retire early. People are working fewer hours. They, you know, reduced their hours during COVID and maybe didn't go back to their jobs. You know, things changed, and it wasn't this big wave that knocked us down. It was more to, you know, and all of a sudden it just dawned on me, my gosh, we're there. And do we even realize it? Again, it's like recognize it.
And that's going back to the fact of employers beginning to realize it. I mean, there's a lot of talk about remote work, at home work, coming into the office, flexibility, all these words, but there's a lot of it with the people that I know are revolving around being able to have time to take care of someone, having that flexibility if something should happen without having to worry about losing my job, to being able to care for them, and not just the legal understanding of having FMLA, but understanding the emotional burden and the emotional toll that it can take. As much as it's loving, as much as it's compassionate, as much as you're passionate, it can get tiring. And helping employers to figure out what can they do to support those employees who may have these caregiving tasks while balancing out their need to run a business.
Yeah, work-life balance is one of the main reasons people are leaving their jobs. And it's not for lack of ambition. It's like you said, it's tiring, it's demanding. But there are ways of employers can provide things way beyond FMLA,
right,
that support caregivers, and not only those who are caregiving today, but those who know that in the future they will have that responsibility for their parents or their grandparents or their adult children with disabilities. It's the tsunami is just the break of it. It will continue for a long time.
right.
And
this trend is going to continue through at least, I mean, the numbers that we see and the demographics we collect at our department is, we're looking at 2040, 2050. It's not going to change. So this idea of when you asked earlier about the things that are sort of like on our radar, I think those are, what are the alternatives or what are the solutions for dealing with that long term? It's not like, okay, we need more providers, we need more this, but if there aren't those people, if there aren't those things, we're not willing to invest in certain things, what technology is available, what alternatives, what different ways of providing those services. We might have to do more group things, so it takes fewer people to care for them or to provide whatever respite it is. Those might have to do those more in group settings. And when you have a pandemic, that's hard to do, right? That's what we couldn't do. So just to think about what are the alternatives to doing the things that we just expect that person's going to be there to come into my home and do these. If they're not there, what do we do? And so that's where the Alliance and all of you on listening today too, your ideas are so important to us to know what are those solutions and how can we make them happen?
And so that brings me to one of my favorite questions of all time that we have in the meeting chat, which I have to tell you, I've been doing this for a while, and this really is one of my favorite questions. This person wants to know, how can they get involved with the Alliance? They're interested. They work for TMG, and they're interested in this topic and possibly joining a work group. And where could we send them?
You want to take that, Lynn?
Sure. Well, let us know. Right now, you can let us know. But we also, on our wisconsincaregiver.org Alliance tab website, there is a place for you to submit your name. And it just asks some basic questions about what your interests are, what you think your strengths are, what sort of things you want to get involved in. And we will be more than happy to be in touch with you and invite you to, it could be a steering meeting or a meeting of one of the work groups that you're interested in, and get you involved, because you definitely are welcome, and we need the more people, the more ideas, the stronger we'll be. So we definitely would love to do that. So please feel free to reach out directly to myself or to Harriet or Lisa Schneider at the Respite Care Association of Wisconsin, and Bryn Seaman at GWAR are the two current co-chairs of the Alliance. Neither of them as well would be happy to respond, and we'll invite you.
Yeah, and I think one of the roles that an organization like TMG can provide is information and knowledge that is important in understanding how all of this works and appears to caregivers. So, some of the details about how does family care work, having someone in those meetings with us who can address some of those questions or give us some insight, could really be helpful. So I would encourage you to get involved, and it might be you want to be on the steering committee, that's cool, or a group, that's cool, or you want to be there as a consultant as we need you.
So wondering if you could maybe drop an email, one of you could drop an email into the meeting chat as well, that this person would be able to contact you. I am looking around on the site for the form, but I am not clicking the right thing. So any help would be appreciated. I did pull up the work groups just so people remember that there is that employer engagement work group, the respite options and providers, changing the care and systems navigation and access, along with an underserved families work group. So there are options for people depending on what they may be looking for, what their interests might be.
Sure, Tim, if you when you click on the Alliance tab, that first, and don't click any of the drop-down boxes, but just scroll down, you'll see membership. There's a membership paragraph,
Got it.
and there's a link there to the application, and also an email, WFACSA@gmail.com. You can also send it there. So that's where you would want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for helping me find that.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
You're a wayfinder, Tim.
There you go. I am part of the Wisconsin Wayfinder Resource Network. All right. Well, any other questions before we close out, or any final, just a moment here. I do this all the time. Any questions as I then just close everything out and nobody has any time to think about it. So we'll just pause for a moment as I do thank you both so much for being here, for the work that you're doing. I hope that I can already predict that as I age, I will need support. I have not been able to do this life alone yet. So I don't think I'm going to become more independent the older I get. I think I'm going to need more support, just because that's the way human beings work. So I look forward to the day where this grows so that there are people that are ready to take care of me when and if, well, actually when I might need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were all in the same boat eventually. So exactly.
Rebecca, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I do. I have a question. I support families whose children come to therapy of different sorts, OT, PT, speech, kids with disabilities. And we have a family in the Wausau area who, I'm glad you spoke about this and talked about grandparents watching kids, because we have a grandma that's a caregiver of a child with disabilities and recently got injured. So she's no longer able to do the caregiving. So I was just kind of wondering where on the website, though, maybe Wisconsin Caregiver, or would they be better off to go to the Wisconsin or the Wayfinder? Where would they best find resources where maybe they could get some substitute caregiving for the child with disabilities in their home until grandma heals from her injury?
Yeah, I think both of those that you mentioned would be workable. For the area that I work in, the non-Medicaid programs, the National Family Caregiver Support Program does have a grandparents and relative caregivers section of that. So if you're a person, you're the primary caregiver of that underage child, they do provide funding to provide temporary supports while that person is either, well, it could be for a lot of reasons, but in this case, because they're injured or have their own illness. But it can also be used to support the grandparent for things like paying for school fees, or, it's actually pretty wide open for the kinds of things that a grandparent might need for support. So it's really meant to support the grandparent. If you're looking for, it can also pay for the OT or PT or, for the child as well, because that is considered respite for the grandparent. But in addition, that other what was the other one that you mentioned? The Wayfinder, to go to
Wayfinder?
Wayfinder? Yeah, I assume that that was going to be able to connect you to services that maybe the child is not currently receiving. Maybe Tim could speak to that a little bit more since that's his area. But what if a child, would they need to be Medicaid eligible? Because I assume this child is not on a Medicaid program. It's not on the children's waiver.
Right. Yeah, I don't know really the specifics for sure. They might have part of CLTS. They might have access to that. But it's kind of just I guess what they're needing kind of immediately speaking is like several days of respite because grandma can't do the respite in the home and child's only 4. So
Right. The
yeah.
Respite Care Association of Wisconsin does also offer grants. So I
Okay.
have to make sure I mention them because they, a lot of time, their grants, it was wonderful that they have joined us. They're now within our area, and I oversee the lifespan respite as well. And they've been so wonderful for filling in those gaps for when other programs, people may not qualify either from age, income, or disability, or whatever the reason might be that they don't qualify or maybe have used up the benefit of another program. The Respite Care Association does also provide grants on a temporary basis. It's not a long-term program, but again, to help fill in those gaps. So I would definitely look into that as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have them on my list and I'm glad to find out about the Wisconsin Caregiver .org because that, I mean, even if there is no financial piece to it, this grandma can get support because that's her role is giving care to this child. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any final thoughts, Harriet and Lynn, before we close out and stop the recording and let me get to lunch?
Well, I just encourage all caregivers to seek those resources. We are definitely in a resource-rich environment here in Wisconsin. We can be grateful for that, but it does require caregivers to remain diligent at finding those resources, connecting with people, be they alliances like this, which is much more formal than your group of friends or fellow church members or neighborhood. Tell your story. Don't be ashamed of it, and get the word out that not only you but others need help, and that's where you get things done, is networking.
Yeah, and I guess my closing words would just be to thank all the caregivers for what you do. We know it's hard, and we know it's trying, and to remember that these programs, a lot of the programs that are out there, some of them have restrictions, are based on income and things, but not all of them are. Like the National Family Caregiver Support Program, there is no age requirement. It's just you have to be caring for someone who's age 60 or older. Don't assume that all the programs are for low-income people and that you don't qualify for some reason. Do contact your ADRC, your Aging Disability Resource Center, or the Wisconsin Wayfinder. Look and see. They're very well, maybe something out there, probably is something out there to help support you, because we know that all caregivers are, you're not all in the same situation, and they're not all based on income. So please reach out and get that support that you need so you can do your best and keep yourself healthy.
And again, thank you so much. And if any of you have the opportunity, take a couple minutes to check out the link I just placed in the chat. We do feedback after every session of conversations, as well as part of that is also asking for, hey, what would you like to talk about coming up in 2024 if we decide to keep this going? We want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the families and the champions in the South region. Well, thank you, Lynn, Harriet. A pleasure to see you again. If you ever get invited back to SHRM again, and you need someone to just show up, I unfortunately was not able to take advantage of the massive amounts of vendors that were there. I what I looked in the room, I'm like, I really wish I could take a day off. I mean, it's just, there was so
It's amazing.
many people. So thank you for all that you're doing to spread this word, to help the Alliance move forward. It really is much needed work. So I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.